Okay, we are to the last video in this series where we're going to do just a couple of things. Probably throughout all, I think there's 5 or 6 videos so far, there's a lot of things that I would want to do, and then there's some things that I think are just a little bit more important, and I would label those as the need to do's. And so with the time that we have left in this class and the amount of time that I want to give you to work on final projects, I'm just going to focus on the need to do's in this last video. And so maybe some of the things that I want to do, we're going to have to focus on learning a little bit more of React, and we will learn more about React at Rankin in our 3rd semester. So right now we're already further than I anticipated as far as what we've done and the stage of the application. So we're in a really good place as far as really what I thought would get accomplished in a week. So what is on today's to-do list? Well, again, these are the things that I deem as need to do. We are going to deploy our application to the World Wide Web, specifically to Heroku.com, and we're going to work with local storage. And what local storage is, right now, if we start up our site, we make some changes to our data, and then we reload the page, it kind of loses everything. So if I change this fella's name, you know, it's there until I refresh, and then it's gone. And so data is only being kind of stored in our computer's RAM, and that's temporary, volatile. And so you need to save it somewhere more permanent storage. And permanent storage meaning a hard drive somewhere. And there's a couple of ways to do that. One would be a database. Well, to make a website save information into a database, we need to know some server-side code. And so we would need to work a little bit more with Node, and we would need an actual database solution on the back end. So we would need a kind of a middle tier, and we'd need a back end, and we'd need essentially a full functioning full stack web app. And right now we're just doing front end code. So in short, you can't do databases with React alone. You have to have a middle tier and a back end for a full stack web application. And so React isn't going to do databases itself. You need more a more robust technology stack. And so local storage is JavaScript's solution for saving data to your computer, not in a database, just kind of saving it in a file format that can actually be found here in this local storage. You can kind of see some different things that I've saved for this website. You can go on any website and kind of look at this application tab to see what this website is saving about you and your information on your hard drive. So local storage is a JavaScript solution that you can use to save and persist data. And as of right now, that's not happening. And so those are the 2 things that we're going to cover. And so why don't we start there? We're going to start with local storage. Now, to save information to local storage, turns out it's really not that much JavaScript. It's just a couple of methods that we have to learn. And so we'll take a look at how to write these methods. Now, right now, kind of our premier method that we're using over and over and over again is this method called save students. And so you can see here we're calling save students when the page loads. We're calling save students when we add a student. We're calling save students when we remove a student or when we update a student. And so the only time we're not calling save students is when we're just doing a search. And so save students is kind of our premier method that we're calling over and over again. And so anytime, whether the page is loading, or whether we're adding a student, or whether we're deleting a student or removing a student, essentially we need to work with local storage. So thankfully, all of these CRUD operations are all calling this one method, and because they're all calling this one method, we can alter this method and just have it interact with local storage, and it will support when we're adding a new student, deleting a student, updating a student, so on and so forth. So we'll kind of start with this if statement. And this if statement says, hey, if the browser supports local storage. So there's this local storage kind of built-in object, and it's either recognized by the browser or it's not. And so if it's not recognized by the browser, then we won't go inside of this if statement. But if local storage object is recognized by the browser, and all modern browsers are going to recognize local storage, we can use this object, this local storage object. And again, there's two really important methods. The first method is called setItem. And this is going to be used to put something into local storage. We're going to put an item called students, which is going to obviously represent all of our students. Keep in mind, save students takes an array of student objects in as a parameter. And so we're just going to call our local storage item, we're going to call it students. And then the method that we're going to use to basically, in this kind of a fun method name called stringify. So JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notations. So when you have JavaScript objects, as we do, these are JavaScript objects. It's following a JSON notation. That notation is property : value, property : value separated by commas. So it's property value pairs separated by commas, all broken up in these curlies. So when you have something that's a JavaScript object, we can say, stringify, so basically convert this JavaScript object into a string. Now, of course, the data that we're going to stringify is our students that has been passed into this method. And then I'll just do a console.log save to local storage. And so just so you could see, we'll, presumably when we call save students, when the page loads, local storage should be recognized. So we should run this line of code and it'll say save to local storage. Now my item is called students. Let me load the page and let me go to the console. And these are all errors from when I was typing. If I refresh, you could see we kind of get this save to local storage called twice, but you can, the point is you are seeing it is saved to local storage. Now if I go to my application local storage, localhost is my website. So this is on a per domain basis, and so I've saved some other things to local storage on localhost. But here's my students, and there's my 10 students with all of their properties. And so you could see that it did in fact save. There's my, again, in this rows, my students, that's what we called it. And then there's all of my data in 10 objects indexed 0 through 9. So that's great. So we are, basically one line of code taking our data and saving it. Now, just to kind of show when I edit Selene and put the S on Selene, go back to the console, you could see I get another save to local storage. And if I go back, application, students, you could see local storage has been updated. Okay, so again, we're kind of benefiting here that this one function is called so many times in our application that every time we call this function, we're passing it our data, and this is saving overwriting what was already in there with our new set of data. So that's putting data in. Here on useEffect, I want to, instead of loading data from the array, which it'll have to do the first time. Like the first time you use this web page, we'll read it out of the array. But every time after that, I want it to use local storage. So we can solve that with a simple if-else statement inside of our useEffect. Okay, and so what we'll ultimately be doing is we'll have if condition do this, else we're going to call save students. Okay, so let's kind of this is going to be inside, this will be nested. So let's start kind of the same way we did before. If local storage object is recognized by the browser, so we don't want to do any of this if it's not recognized by the browser. Let's go ahead and read out of local storage. Just to make it less confusing, I'm going to say I'm going to read my, or I'm going to name my variable students from ls. You know, students local storage. Just be really blunt about it. Students local storage. On the way in, we do json.stringify. On the way out, we use this parse method. So parse will parse a string into a JavaScript object notation. So stringify does the opposite. You know, this is a read operation. The other one was a write operation. What are we going to parse? We're going to do local storage dot get item, and we call it students. And so here's our, we did a set item on the way in, we do a get item on the way out. And then we either parse it into a string or we parse it into a JavaScript object. Now we'll have a nested if statement. If there's data in students local storage, then let's call save students, passing it the data from local storage. Else, this is the save students that uses the local array, which is just called students. So you imagine the first time you're using this page, the browser is going to say, okay, do I recognize local storage? Yes. Let's read from local storage. Well, that's either going to be null or it's going to have data in it. If it has data in it, then we pass that data to local storage. Otherwise, if it's null or empty or whatever it returns, then we call save students, passing the data from the array. So what's nice about this, that's it. That's it. Now we have data that will persist when an end user makes a change. If we delete a student, it will be gone. If we update a student, that student will be gone until you stop reading out of local storage. You can delete from local storage. So let's just demo this, and as I typically say, let's see what's broken. So now the idea is if I change Salim, well, there you go. Actually, when I loaded the page, it read from local storage. Remember the last time we changed Salim, we added the S. And let's just delete Roxy. And if I reload the page, Roxy remains gone. If I delete a student, they remain gone. If I add a student, they will be there. Now, one thing that's worth noting is the way that we coded this image. In order to actually save the image onto another location on the hard drive, you do need some middle tier logic. You do need like a web server API, maybe with Node. In other words, this is a front end app. In order to save a file, like we're kind of pretending that we're saving a file here, you need that middle tier logic, that application tier logic that we don't have. So our add student works. Bob Marley is now added. And if I refresh the page, it seems like it persists, but actually it doesn't. So the image doesn't. So let me show. If I go to localhost, now you could see Bob Marley is broke, his image is broke, because we never actually wrote code when we use this file. We never actually wrote code to save it anywhere besides my desktop. Like right now it's on my desktop, on my computer, and we kind of faked it, if you will, to get it up and running, but we didn't save that, which we would have to use some Node logic to save that image somewhere in a reusable place. That's just not the case. So if I actually inspect here and I look at my image source, we get this localhost image file that, I think that was in memory temporarily, but it doesn't work. So point being, the images aren't going to work. Everything else will. We will learn how to make that middle tier logic in third semester. So it's coming around the corner. Everything else works. Everything else is in local storage. I can delete Bob Marley. Let me just go down to one student. And when I go to local storage, and I say students, you could just see my one student, and I can refresh the page, I can reload the page, and it's still just going to be one student. If you ultimately want to reset it and reread the original data set, you have to delete right here. You come into application, click on your local storage key, and click delete. And then refresh the page and they all come back, right? Because keep in mind, this is resaving it to local storage, right? So everything is now saving to local storage. You know how to kind of tinker with that. And we have completed the local storage. It's just a couple methods to work with, so not too bad. Next step is actually getting this onto Heroku. And so there's a few steps here. I'm going to go ahead and close. This is my folder that I created in the beginning called CRUD Students. If I open up here, you can see that I'm actually, this hidden folder right here, you can see this folder is hidden. I have hidden items selected, so you can see this Git folder. If I turn off this, notice it disappears, right? So this Git folder is telling me that this is a GitHub repository already. I obviously know that because I've just been submitting my code and pushing it as I've been coding this in the class with local storage. So I'll just say added local storage. So I'll go ahead and do a little, and I use different tools to push and pull and all this, and Tortoise Git is just one tool that I use. The assumption here is that you guys don't have, this is not anything that, if you've been following along, I have not been asking you to put anything into GitHub. So I'm going to treat this as if you don't have a GitHub repo for this directory. And so the first thing to do is you need to create a new repo on GitHub. And so I'll just call this CRUD Students Live. Okay. So this will be the folder on my local computer that goes, actually instead of live, I'll just call it Heroku. CRUD students Heroku. And so what I need to do is get a GitHub repo created and synced up into that folder. And so I'm logged into GitHub. Here's a plus icon, new repository. And so my repository name will be called CRUD students. And I've got a couple different owners I could use. I'm just using EA Gudmestead, that's my main. So here's my CRUD students. I'm the owner. CRUD students React. I'll make it public in case you want to see it. Let's go ahead and check the add a README file. For the git ignore, we're going to select node, and the license is going to be MIT. And so we can use those settings to get it live. The git ignore, as you probably know, says, hey, these are the files to not copy up into the repository. There's a lot of files that don't need to be copied and sent back and forth, and so this is for a node project. MIT license says, you know, this is mine for, you know, this is my code. There's different licenses out there. You know, you can kind of look into the specific MIT licenses and see if this isn't the right solution for you. You could choose a different one. But for school purposes, this one should work. Okay, so these are my repository settings. I'm going to create Git Repo. Okay, so very empty repo. I'm going to go ahead and open up GitHub Desktop. And let's minimize. So as of right now, I've got these files here. So I'm going to copy these files out and paste into this folder. Now I'm actually going to leave the node modules alone. I'm going to leave the Git folder alone. I'm going to copy public source. I'm going to leave git ignore because that will come from GitHub. Package JSON, lock, and I'll also get the README. So these are the files that I'm going to copy and paste. Oh, I take that back. Watch this. I'm going to just delete this. Are you sure I want to delete this folder? Yes. So if you followed me along, I took a step. I need to get this repo onto my desktop and name it that folder that I just named. So I need to clone this repo. That's my next step. So let's redo this. So here is the URL that we're going to use in our clone. So I'm just going to click on this copy button to copy that URL. Then I'm going to come into GitHub Desktop and I'm going to say File, Clone Repository. I'm going to click on this URL tab. And I called it CRUD Students Heroku. Okay, so this will create the folder CRUD Students Heroku using that GitHub repo, and that's the proper steps. Now that I've done that, I should be able to pull that folder over. There we go. And I should look in here, and there's my empty, this is my empty repo local that I'll be able to push up to my GitHub repo on github.com. Okay, now we copy and paste. Again, we just need to copy and paste. We leave the Git folder alone. I leave node modules off because there's thousands of files in there that it's actually faster to just re-download them instead of copying them. So I'm going to click on public source package JSON in the lock, copy and paste those over. Okay, so now I've got CRUD Students Heroku, and basically I've got the same thing twice on my computer. If I open this with code, now to get that node modules folder over there, I've got a command to run at the terminal called Npm Install. This is going to install that node modules, which are all the dependencies that we have, all the bootstrap and the icons and everything else that came in there. Again, because it's a node git ignore, these modules are not copied up to GitHub, so that when you go from one computer to another using your repo, you always have to run an npm install. And now we should be able to npm start this and basically get the same working site that we had before on a different folder on our computer. Let this boot up. And there we go. And we should be able to save, refresh. So we know it's all up to date because we got local storage working. And if I now go back here to GitHub Desktop, you can kind of see all of the changes, and I'll say initial commit with CRUD operations. So commit to main, push, and that should allow me to go back here, refresh, and then you could see public and source folder, package and package JSON, they're all committed. So we're good to go here. And again, you're going to notice the node modules folder was not pushed up, so that's all good. Okay, now a couple more things to get up and running. Because Heroku, I mean, there's all these different versions of Node. Heroku needs to know what version of Node that our app uses. And if you kind of come in here and do a node/v, you could see that Node version 18.10. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to tell Heroku what version of Node our React app uses. The way that we're going to do that is by opening up package.json, and kind of right here after this private, we're going to add another key value pair, and this is going to be the engines with a JavaScript object, node, and this will be in quotes where we put our version. Now mine is version 18.1.0, so we'll put 18.1.0. Okay, so I'll save that. And again, what this does is it tells Heroku what version of Node that our app is using. Your version has to match whatever this command returns. This node/v 18.10, that's what you need in this string right here. 18.10. All right, so now we'll close package.json. Next, we need to create a new file in the root. This is going to be called static.json. And I'm going to copy and paste some code here because it's not a ton of code, but it would be easy to fat finger something. And I will post this in Discord for your reference. In fact, I'll do that right now. So here, I believe this is the tick. There we go. So here's my JSON object. that basically says that we're using a single page application. We're not going to be having any routes. In other words, we don't have multiple pages. And so, basically single page application. Everything's done on one page. We don't have any routes. And this file is needed to... Now, again, if you need to type this manually, just be very careful. But if you're in my class, you've got access to Discord, you can copy and paste this little bit of code. Okay, so there's static.json. Now if I kind of come back into here, let's get these pushed onto GitHub. So let's say added static.json and updated package.json. Commit push. Okay, that should be the end of the config changes for deployment. Now what I need to do is go to Heroku.com and okay, my third commit was, there it is, added static JSON and updated package JSON 19 seconds ago. Okay, just overlook that. So now we'll go to Heroku. And you log in, it'll take you to your dashboard. And I'm going to create a new app. And this will be CRUD-students. Has to be a unique name. So you might not be able to make yours CRUD students. And create app. Okay. Now under settings, we're going to go to config variables. Config vars change the way your app behaves. In addition to creating your own, some add-ons come with their own. So we're going to click on this reveal config vars. And the key is node environment. The value, and that's all caps, node environment is production. Click on add. So this is the one config vars that we need. And then we're going to click on add build pack. Build packs are scripts that run when your app is deployed. They're used to install dependencies for your app and configure your environment. There's not one here for React. And so if you just kind of search for it, it's not there. The build pack that is out there and it is supported is this Mars-create React app. So Mars/create-React-app. So, this is basically saying use this create React app on the server so that you can get all of the node modules on the server. And so that will be needed for this app. So let's click on Save Changes. And if this works, you're going to get this added, which gives you a build pack Mars create React app /TGZ. It's like an execution package, like an exe on Windows. So basically, again, to get our node server, which is middle tier software, to create a React app, that's what you need. And now we go back to deploy. I'm going to click on GitHub. You might need to authenticate. Mine is CRUD students. That's the name of my repo. So I'll just say, if I search for students, why I have two I did a practice where I practiced this before recording, and I'm wondering if I go to your repos. I do have two exactly the same. This one updated 4 minutes ago. This one updated 16 minutes ago. I shouldn't, so hang tight with me. I don't need... I don't want to guess at this. I want to guess it's the top one. But I don't want to guess at this. So here's what I'll do. I'll just break the old one, because you're not going to have this problem. And I don't really need two of them anyways. So I'm going to come into here, go into settings, and I'm just going to delete this one. Again, let's make sure this is the right one to delete. This is the one that was updated 17 minutes ago. So I'm going to come here into settings, scroll down, delete this repository, type this in, paste. And this is a one-time code, so it's not like it matters. Okay, so now that one's gone. So now if I kind of come back, let's just see, deploy, GitHub, students. There we go. Click on connect. And now we're going to enable automatic deploys, which means every time that I update this repo, it's going to deploy the new version. And let's click on deploy branch. And it's going to go through and get my server up and running. And there you can see downloading, installing Node, then it'll install all the dependencies, all the Node modules. There you go. So just like, it's like doing a create React app on the server now is the idea here. And as you know, that takes a little while, so I'm just going to pause. Okay, and it came to the end here and says your app was successfully deployed. Let's click on view. Notice this is no longer localhost. This is now crudstudents.herokuapp.com. Again, this is why it's a globally unique identifier here, so you're not going to be able to use that. You know, Selene is back to his normal self, because keep in mind, local storage is on a domain basis, and so local storage works. Now if I go to application, local storage, here I just have my one key. We're no longer on localhost, we're now on Heroku. So but you know, just to demo, local storage is still working. There it is. If I refresh the website, you know, the update's still there. If I delete Corey, you know, Corey's still gone, so on and so forth. So we have a working, you know, deployed CRUD application using React. So that's the end of this tutorial. Hopefully this was easy enough to follow along. And good luck. Let me know if you guys have questions. Thank you. Bye.